And as it wobbles around, it sort of breaks up in its amplitude, its strength, and so it would split into 2 and then split into 4, and then the 4 would get a little bit beefier, and they might split into 8 or 16. It wouldn't be that regular. 1 or 2 might drop off, and you may just have 3 at one point, and then 8 the next day, and then 23 the day after that, and then 40 the day after that. Most of them would be reasonably stable to the general region of the South Pole, but then some of them might indeed go walkabout, and at some point the North Pole would disappear. What that effect would have on the compasses is anybody's guess. Would they just spin and zero in on the nearest South Pole? I just don't know. But then shortly thereafter, after the North Pole disappears, one of them, the southern poles, becomes the primary one, and it flips. And that flip can take place in a matter of mere hours on the sun. So I would suspect on something the size of Earth, we're probably talking minutes. And then that gets reestablished as the new magnetic north. And then the South Poles all sort of coagulate a bit over time, and it doesn't take long. We're talking 40 days or so. The speed at which this can occur is relatively shocking to the academics the last time that it happened on the sun. They knew it was going to happen, and they shouldn't have been shocked, but I guess they suspected it took years or something.
Ground Rod, I think you've got a follow-up as well.
Yeah, Clif, did you notice today Geo's showing the magnetic spikes southward, and there's quite a coronal hole facing Earth-directed right now.
I know. Not a good sign again. The activity on the sun, I suspect that the Maurice Cottrell's interpretation of the lid at Palenque, I suspect, is accurate, and that they really were focusing all their efforts on this mega sunspot cycle, and if so, then Gerald's correct, and so on. And again, we'll see a build-up until April. We'll see another peak, which will probably yield some more nasty earthquakes and maybe more superstorms, and then if we're unlucky, we might get northern hemisphere snows in July as that July 15th peak goes off with another set of major storms and more earthquakes. There we go again.
Acedia, I believe you have a question for Clif.
Yes. In the most recent volume of The Shape of Things to Come, you note that the concern for space by a Chinese officialdom is indicated to extent of vast, for them, expenditures of all kinds of resources, and that the fear subset is pointing to what the Chinese officialdom is trying to confirm and what they already know as being causal factors. And I'm wondering if this suggests that the Chinese government, like the powers that were, are very much aware of an impending pole shift caused by exoplanetary forces in our solar system, and if they're devoting sizable resources into prepping and protecting their own minions from this event, like building underground bunkers, hoarding food, something like out of the movie 2012.
That's a good question. The language could certainly be interpreted that way. I didn't see it that way at the time when I was writing about the resources, because what I was focused on was the resources that were going to be spent at the scientific level to do analysis and so on. So it's as though the data seems to be signaling as though there's a hiring boom going to happen with Chinese scientists as the Chinese government gets real serious in a Manhattan Project style endeavor, or another Three Gorges Dam, only at a scientific level. So that's all I was really looking at that point. But the resources use of from the Chinese also included all of this stuff about these empty cities that the Chinese have or will have that are going to be purpose-built for some space-oriented endeavor. And I don't think it's going to be like, space ports or that kind of thing. It very well could be that they're going to do a let's try and save as many people as we can, what am I thinking of, civil defense kind of an effort with giant bunkers and all of that sort of a deal. It certainly would fit with the indicators for China becoming the planet's largest consumer of concrete, to the point where cement factories will open up in other countries nearby just to fill the need. And that'll actually, in a curious sort of a way, benefit North Korea tremendously, because they're going to relocate some or find some gravel or something up north and set up some very large factories to feed this Chinese need for cement that just seems to come out of the data overnight.
Okay, Cliff, just following on with the Terra entity, living in Australia, do you have any further info on the Pacific Plate cracking and when it might occur? Any hints in the last report, and what type of effects, maybe like a 10 magnitude earthquake or anything like that?
I don't know about the earthquake size. The data that we have suggests that the Pacific Plate will crack at basically the same angle relative to the equator that we see the mountains of the western edge of the United States, or western edge of North America and South America line up on. That same kind of an angle appears to connect from South America up through towards the northern part of the Sea of Japan and in towards southern Siberia, and that's along the crack line. So it won't be a separation like we saw in the Banda Aceh earthquake. It won't be that, I think it was 120 meter shift, left to right, so to speak, a shear kind of a quake. This will be an actual crack. So the effects that we see described in the data show in northern hemisphere, and for America, it shows the west coast rising up as a result. And for Australia, it shows the eastern and northeastern side of Australia rising up relative to the crack in the plate. I don't think it means a corresponding shift downward on the other side of Australia. So it's not like a coin where you're going to lift up one edge and the other edge has to go down. I think the whole data seems to be describing an upthrust event, enough to cause some serious damage in and of itself, but a good thing in the overall scheme of things, because the subsequent water damage is going to be quite severe all around the Pacific Rim, and this is one of those things where the earthquake, or the water quake is described as going around the planet in both directions simultaneously, so not only east to west, but also north to south.
Yeah, I think you're right, Cliff, because I remember last year there was some buoys that apparently they said that it was malfunctioning, but it showed a 300 feet rise in the buoys in 1 week. So I think you're right about rising in the Australian side. I've got another question though in regards to your latest report. The question was, in Shape 9, you stated that volcanoes to the north and east of Australia and New Zealand will alter the populations of those countries. You mentioned as a worst case, keeping in mind linguistics are on the side of the extreme, that northern coast of Australia will be the destination of choice for millions of waterborne refugees. Could you elaborate on that, please?
The same kind of, the same data set that holds the information about the Pacific Rim and the crack on the plate itself is built around an archetype of a fulcrum. And apparently a fulcrum is going to shift or change relative to the core of the planet, causing the tectonic plate activity, which is going to squeeze out more magma and alter the shape of some volcanoes, likely in the Southeast Asia region from Philippines all the way up through into Vietnam. And it will become untenable to live there, but it will be such that it, in some areas, it'll be a Pompeii-style rush to the sea to survive that day. But in other areas, it's going to be a slightly more accommodating process, in the sense that it might take days to get to the point where you realize, oh, there's just too much gas here and we can't survive anymore. We'd better hop on the boat and head south, which is the only place that has clean air. And that's really what the data suggested, was a diaspora of some considerable size, of like whole damn countries that had to just get out.
Oh, okay. What does the webbot say about the current activity in the Gulf of Aden? In your last interview, you insinuated that the powers that were maybe trying to move the magnetic north away from the geographic north. Could you please elaborate on the importance of the Gulf of Aden activity?
It's really goofy, the amount of language that's showing up around that area, as well as its particular, in the grand scheme of things, unimportance. So it's very much like having a lot of words show up about a very specific spot in the Gobi Desert. One would just simply wonder why. So there obviously is a basic a consciousness focus at a number of different levels relative to this very unimportant spot on the planet. And it's obvious that the amount of words that are going on is that we're capturing, especially relative to the archetypes involved, is a small fraction of what's actually being uttered or typed or cabled back and forth. And I actually can't wait for WikiLeaks to come out with a little bit more. Maybe we can find some more trails into this, actually. But it's also obvious that the periodicity involved with the earthquakes, as well as the now noted magnetic disturbances, are not within what we would normally call natural. The periodicity is machine-like in a like a sewing machine needle at a very steady, specific rate that belies the idea that they could in any way be involved with a natural solar current flux. So the position of it would tend to suggest that it's being used as an anchor. Now, I've been given some information that shows distortions in the ionosphere on the other side of Africa in a great circle line that brings it down to the center of Australia, where reputedly there is this southern version of HARP. And it is also in a great circle line from HARP.
Pine Gap, I guess.
Pine Gap, correct. Yes, exactly. Well, I don't know. I actually don't know specifics. It just goes to goes right through the middle of Australia, way into the back, and you just have this nice little line that goes over to the Aden and so on, and then back up to HARP. And it's just real curious that it's this nice little intersection, and the antipodal side of it in Africa shows a upwardly arcing dimple, if you will, in the ionosphere at the same time that this is going on with these spikes, if you will, striking in the Gulf of Aden. The only thing that, I mean, there's a number of different points of speculation. I suspect that it's very pertinent to the efforts of the powers that be relative to trying to stabilize our magnetic shifts. And I think that that's really all they're hoping for. I don't know, though. I don't have anybody on the inside trying to feed me any information about this relative to Aden or any of that. But what I do know is that the periodicity of the doming in West Africa is extremely coincident to the peaks in acceleration in the consumption of electricity of HARP. So I think that that's pretty good indication HARP's involved. Again, why? Speculation. Maybe they're just trying to anchor the North Pole and hope for the best. Maybe they're trying to put up a barrier to prevent fracturing of the South Pole, or maybe it's not related at all. It might just be part of this weather wars where people are going a little bit crazy and say, well, okay, let's, put up this dome here so that we can cause these effects.
Mulder, I believe you have a question.
Yes, I wanted to find out if you saw any major activity on the Cascadia Fault anytime soon.
This last time, as of 2010, we ran into a situation where there were going to be so many great quakes that it was really kind of too high of a noise-to-signal ratio within the data to get into specifics. It's real easy, for instance, to see an earthquake if it's in isolation as the model space has progressed from week to week to week. As you shift these little bits through model space, the little aquarium, if there's going to be an earthquake,